In this tutorial, I want to demonstrate how to record a screen capture tutorial using Camtasia. By now, you should have already watched the many excellent tutorials on how to use these programs linked in our course site, and you should be very familiar with Camtasia's essential functionalities. You'll watch me build a simple tutorial from start to finish, and we're going to target the following skills: how to set capture resolution, how to segment and then trim clips, how to clean up mistakes, including crossfading audio, how to insert transitions, video transitions, how to insert callouts and implement pans and zooms, and finally, of course, how to export a final file in MP4 format. Before we begin, though, it may help to see a finished example of what I expect you to produce. Our time limit is short for the homework assignment, so you'll have to choose a very specific software task. In my example, I'll demonstrate how to download a special software utility. And of course, in the real world, the tutorial is going to be much longer, and you would end up seeing not only how to download, but also how to install and how to actually use it. But for this assignment, I have to focus on something really short, and you should as well, so make sure you choose a software application that you use in your teaching or training discipline. Because I'm an instructional technologist, obviously I'm going to pick something more technical. If you're a content professional or a content teacher, then you'd probably choose a software application that's relevant to that content. Anyway, that's your choice. Here we go. This tutorial will demonstrate how to download the new AirServer utility to connect an iPad, an iPhone, or an Android mobile device to the desktop so that you can then capture the screen using a desktop screen capture application like Camtasia. The first step, of course, is to download the actual utility. So we have to go to the download menu from the airserver.com website, and we then have to choose which version we want. And you can see over here that there's a very attractive free version. It used to be perpetually free. Now it's only got a 7-day time limit on it, but that's the one that I'm going to use for right now. So I'll click on the download button. The next screen that pops up asks me to register. And in the registration field, it asks you the typical information you can expect. It is important that you put your email in there so that you can activate the application after it downloads. Anyway, I've already registered, so I'm just going to click Already Registered down here, but you would click this button. In the next screen that pops up here, I have to choose the correct download installer for whatever my device is. In my case, I know that I have a 64-bit Windows compatible machine. I actually have Windows 7. So I'm going to download this one, and I can read the system requirements here. That's what I need. Mac users are over here, PC users over here. Mine's the 64-bit version, so that's what I'm going to click on. And of course, you know what to do from here. You get a dialog window that pops up asking where do you want to save this installer package. Note that it's got a file extension .msi. That's really helpful because it will automatically install after it finishes downloading. So all I have to do right now is click Save and then follow the directions on screen. Of course, the first step in creating this tutorial is to go ahead and queue up the site or the software application, get that window on screen that I'm going to use. In this case, I browse to the website airserver.com and I maximize it to full screen. I've already set my monitor to 1920 by 1080. That's full HD resolution because that's what my monitor is capable of. If you're on a weak system, you might want to do 1280 by 720 instead and then fit the window inside that frame. Either way, queue all your content up so you're ready to record. Then of course it's a very simple process. You just click record the screen. You'll get a countdown message, and then soon enough you'll be able to navigate through here and click on whatever it is, demonstrate the skills that you want your learners to understand. And then when you're finished, you simply press on the stop button. But don't forget, if you break up the video into smaller skills, sometimes it's easier to just click on the pause button, figure out what you're going to say, or take a look at your script so you know what you're going to say, and then click pause again to record the next segment. Sometimes that's a lot easier than clicking on the stop button. I generally only click pause between different segments, and then when I click stop, it's only at the very end. After I finish recording everything, I'll see up here in the top left-hand corner of my clip bin, there's the clip bin tab, I've got that depressed. I've got the actual Camtasia recording file. This is the raw recording file. It'll only open in Camtasia. But that's the main file that you want to click and drag down into your track. In many cases, if it's the first one that you've put in here, it will pop up automatically. and you'll typically get 2 tracks. You'll get the main track, and then if you recorded any system audio, remember the system audio is an option that you have. And so it depends. If you need system audio because the software that you use relies on audio, then you want to record that as well. If you didn't record that, you won't get this second track here. And it can be a little misleading because you really have 3 tracks. Up here where it says track 2, this is the main track that I recorded. If I right click on it and click on separate video and audio, you'll see that there's my audio track and there's my video track. So all you have to do is right click on them and you can separate them. But if you do that, you have to be very careful to make sure you keep everything synchronized. The very first thing that I typically like to do in most of my tutorials is to get the audio track to edit the audio track so that the noise is removed. And it's really easy to do that. The first thing, I'll take my playhead and I'll find a flat spot here. Do you see the flat line here? The dead air before the waveform kicks up, indicating that I'm talking. What I'll typically do is select a few seconds, a couple seconds, whatever, and then I'll go to my audio tab and I'll click on, sometimes you have to expand the advanced submenu here, but I'll click on manual noise training on selection. And when I do that, it happens really fast, but what it's done, it's now taken all the background hiss and fuzz, or at least the majority of it. And I'm recording this in my office here, and I have a really good microphone, and sometimes that's kind of a curse because it picks up all the extraneous ambient noise. And this manual noise training really helps reduce some of that. So now I've applied that to my entire audio track right here. The next edit that I typically do is to edit out the flat spots and to edit out the mistakes. For example, I know here at the very beginning, do you see this waveform? Tell you what, let me raise the track up some so that exaggerates a little bit. It's easier to see. There's the dead air at the very beginning. That's normal. But I started off and then I stumbled and I realized, hey, I'm just going to start over. So I really didn't get serious until I was right here. So I know that I want to get rid of this stuff here, and you know how to trim stuff out by now. Typically what I'll do is I'll put the playhead right where I want it to begin, and then I'll take the edge and trim it back, but I have to make sure I do that for all of my tracks so everything stays synchronized. And now they all have the same beginning. And to get rid of this gap here, there are a couple ways to do it, but the way I like to do it is to lasso. I'll click in the empty space and then drag a selection marquee around all 3 of those tracks and then just drag them back. It makes it a little bit easier. Now I also know that I made a mistake somewhere right around in here, and I'm kind of embarrassed, but all right, listen to my stupid mistake. In the next screen that pops up here, blah, blah, blah. Okay, my mind just went totally blank there. And you can see on the waveform where I goofed up. And so I paused afterwards to make it really easy to find this mistake. Now I can go in here and I'll zoom in just a little bit. And I'll put my playhead right about there. And I'll come in here and I'll kind of visualize what I want to get rid of. And then the simplest way to do that is to segment the clip. Currently, I've just got 1 clip. I have 3 tracks, and each track has 1 clip on it. But to really make this efficient, I'm actually going to hold the Shift key down and select all 3 clips, and then go up to my razor tool. In Camtasia, they call it the split tool. In most video editing applications, they call it a razor tool. But anyway, watch what happens when I click on this tool right here. See how it's now notched each one of these tracks, each one of those clips. So now I can simply come in here very carefully with the mouse and trim it back to where I finally got back to saying the right things. And I'm going to synchronize everything else. I'm just going to go in here and trim all 3 tracks so they're all the same, and then I'll lasso them and move them back. Then I'll zoom out and I'll come back here and I can see I've got another section here. This was some dead space here when I was trying to get the web page queued up. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make sure that all 3 tracks are selected. Then I'm going to click on my razor tool and then simply trim up to right about there. And it takes a little bit of practice, but you'll figure this out as you go along. So now I've trimmed all those and segmented those, and now I'm going to shove them up right next right next to each other. After I've got all my clips trimmed properly, I'll then go back to the sections where I think I need a transition. For example, at the end of the first clip, I'm talking about having to get registered so that you can then click on the link to download this software. This is the next step. And the very next screenshot goes to a different page on the site, and it's such an abrupt change. I think I want to put a transition in there. Typically, we put transitions in when sometimes like when we made a mistake and we just want to avoid having a jump cut in there, or more often we use a transition when the content has changed significantly, and in this case it really has. So the first step, of course, is to put the playhead right on the seam, just so you know where you're putting everything, and then switch over to the Transitions tab and grab the transition that you want. I typically try to be very conservative because, again, to be consistent with Mayer's multimedia principles, we don't want to cognitively overload the learner with needless animations. So I'm just going to use this fade through black transition. Now when I scrub back through it, well, it doesn't really look, can't really tell unless you play it, but I'll play it right here in the next screen. Okay, and you'll see we get a nice fade effect there. It looks really good. So I'll put one there, and I'll tell you what, while I'm at it, I'm going to go ahead and trim the end of these clips, each one of these, again, to keep them synchronized. And I'll go ahead and put a fade to black effect at the end, and I'll put a fade through black effect at the beginning. And now when I begin this tutorial, everything fades up right as the audio comes in, and it looks really good. With everything trimmed and my transitions inserted between the clips, I'll start looking for opportunities to add some minor effects. I don't want to get too crazy here, but I want to especially look for opportunities to cue the learner. And one of the more obvious opportunities I have for that is on this screen here, when I want to point out to them that I'm using the free trial version of this software download. And one of the ways that we can kind of point this out or cue the learner visually here is by using what Camtasia calls a callout function. And so I'll select the callout tab here, and I'll click on the Add Callout button. I'll choose a shape. In this case, I'm just going to choose that rectangle. And I'm not going to put a fill color on it. I'm going to leave it no fill, but I am going to put a red border on it. And I want that border to be pretty thick. So I'm going to choose something like 8 pixels wide. And then I'm going to position it right on top of that, and I can simply resize as I need to. Something like that looks pretty good. And once it's in the position that I think it will work, I look down at my timeline and look at what's happened here. I've had a new track added, and this shape is now on there. And so if I scrub through this, it pops up on screen and then it disappears. And so if I play the audio, you'll see what happens. And you can see over here that there's a very attractive free version. It used to be perpetually free. Now it's only got a 7-day time limit on it, but that's the one that I'm going to use for right. Okay, so you can see how the actual call out comes up on screen, fades in, and then fades out, and it's in here. We can move it around just like we can any other element on its own independent track. And so this is a great way to call attention to details on the screen where you think the learner needs to be focused. And of course, you remember one of the other cueing techniques we talked about, and that's the zoom and pan control option that Camtasia has. Later in the video, I want to draw attention to this particular part of the screen because this is where the Windows user needs to make sure that they click. So to make this, to add more emphasis to this particular part of the video, I position the playhead right where I think I want that zoom to start. Then I have to click on the zoom and pan section. And at this point, this is where it's going to start. So I'm going to take this handle and click and drag and reposition until I get a rectangle that's small enough to focus on what I think I need. Maybe something like that. And now I have a real tight shot of that particular section. And if I look down here in my timeline, I've got this real tiny arrow icon that's been added on top of that particular video clip. And if I zoom in just a little, you'll see that it actually has a duration, and each point here is draggable. I can make it longer. I can click and move it backwards and forwards if I want by grabbing the other handle. And what this does, this allows you then to precisely position when you want the zoom effect to start and when you want it to end. So what you can do is take a look at your waveform, listen to it, and then cue it up exactly where you think you want this effect. So let's go back here. I'm talking, and then right when I get here, it starts zooming in. And notice that it zooms in at the same time that mouse was moving. Sometimes that's really helpful. You want to try to synchronize some of your events on screen, but that just takes a little bit of practice. Finally, one of the very last edits that I typically make is to crossfade any awkward audio segments. And to do this requires me to go to each seam, anywhere I've segmented a clip, and especially where I've trimmed clips. I press the play, I put the playhead there, and then I press the play button and I listen. If I hear any chopping or clipping, then I know I need to go in here and fix some stuff. And I know that I've got an issue here. Even though the flat line in these waveforms looks pretty identical, there's actually a little hiss and pop there right on the seam. So I'm gonna zoom in real tight here, not quite all the way in, but maybe one step back. And I'm gonna put my playhead right there, and I'm gonna select that audio clip, and I'm gonna click on the audio tab, and I'm gonna tell it to fade in, or excuse me, fade out. I want it to fade out. And see how it then graphically gives you this sloped line? And you can actually grab this handle here and move it around. So I'm gonna move this, whoops, gotta make sure you keep your volume at 100%. I'm going to move it right about here because right on the seam is where it pops, and I just hate that. So now I'm going to do the exact opposite on the next clip. I'm going to have it fade in, and by default they put it a couple seconds on the fade, and I don't want that. I want it to be real tight there. So now when the playhead actually plays here, I'm going to get this real subtle crossfade, and it will prevent that hiss or that pop on that edge from actually being heard. It's a really cool technique. So keep that in mind. Another place that's really useful, of course, is at the very end of your production. Right in here, you can see how, if I zoom in right at the very end here, you can see how everything fades to black, but you can still hear a little bit of the hiss. So I might want this clip to fade out also. So I'll click fade out, and then I'll customize where I want the fade to start. And you just need to pay attention to the waveform and then listen through the headphones so you can understand that right as I'm finishing, that's where I want it to start. You can see the line go down here. That means the volume is going to drop, and it will coincide nicely with that visual fade transition that we inserted as well. Finally, of course, at the very end, after I've listened to this a million times and I've trimmed everything and I've put my transitions in and any cueing, graphics, and all the special effects that I think that I needed, while still trying to be consistent with Mayer's multimedia principles so that we don't overwhelm the learner, when I think I'm finally done, now it's time to export. And hopefully you've been remembering to save your project file many times along the way here. I guess I didn't demonstrate that very well in this tutorial, but trust me, I did. I just did it off camera. Anyway, my point is, make sure you save the project file. The project file is going to have a CamProj file extension, and only Camtasia can open that. That is not an exported file. That's simply your project file. What we want to do now is actually export the MP4 file. That's the video file format that can be ingested by YouTube and any other video site. It can be implemented in a learning management system. It can be imported into a PowerPoint presentation or any other type of larger learning object. So MP4 is our target file format, and we create that here by going to the File menu and choosing Produce and Share. And you have a lot of different options in this pull-down menu here. And you remember, you have to choose the the export resolution that matches your recording resolution. And I know that I selected a 1080 full screen recording dimension resolution for this particular session. So I'm going to export an MP4 right there up to 1080. It's okay if you go down. I could go to a 720 because my source material, my raw recording is 1080. I could go down to 720 and it would still look great. But you can't record at 720 and then export at 1080, because it just has to make up the data, and it will look terrible if you do that. So again, the rule of thumb is always to match whatever you recorded at. And if you end up blowing up your machine because you recorded at 1080 and you try to export at 1080 and it dies on you, then maybe you can try to export at 720. But there are only two real target resolutions that you should be concerned about right now. And one is for 1080 and one is for 720. There's some exceptions to that, but that's kind of beyond this course. Anyway, so I've got it set to 1080. Then I simply click Next. I'll give it a name, and then I'll click the Finish button, and it'll usually take a few minutes to finish rendering. And then I'll have this wonderful exported MP4 that I'm ready to use in whatever my instructional design requires. So that's it. That's our tutorial on how to create a really simple software demonstration tutorial. Now it's your turn. Pick a software tool that's commonly used in your academic discipline and think of a very, very specific task that you could demonstrate within a minute or so on screen by capturing and creating a tutorial using Camtasia. Can't wait to see what you come up with. Good luck.